So if everyone's good to go, we may as well get started. We have a lot to cover, so I do want to start on time, end on time for everyone. I'm sure you have other things to do later this afternoon. But just want to say thanks so much for spending some time with us. My name is Christine Orr, and I'm with Ringgold, and I'm our North American Sales Director. I handle our clients and partners in the North American region. And just by way of background, I spent about 15 years working with scholarly publishers, and I spent a lot of time on the society publication side. So I'm really used to seeing data come out of kind of membership silos, subscription data, things like that, author data. So the questions I always wanted to ask with my data are, I think, what a lot of you are asking as well. We'll go through some of that as we get going. I'm joined today by my colleague Jay Henry, who's out in Portland. Ringgold, for those of you who don't know, we're a virtual company. We have most of us, about 25 of us. Most of us work out of our homes in and around the globe. We have a lot of folks in the UK. I'm coming to you from outside of Washington, D.C. today at my home, and Jay is out in the Portland area. I'm going to throw it over to Jay for a moment.
Hi, everybody. Jay Henry. And actually, I should say, Christine, I guess we're a little less virtual now than we used to be. In 2012, Ringgold has always been a Portland-based company. But in 2012, we purchased Booknews, which is also a good morning. That was also a Portland-based company, and as a result, we have a true office now, where we do some metadata preparation for scholarly monographs and ebooks. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. I've been with Ringgold for 2 years. Helped with the merger with Booknews Incorporated, and before that, spent nearly a decade at Blackwell Book Services and some time at Inventa in Cambridge, Massachusetts, working with electronic journals. So about 15 years of experience with myself, and looking forward to a good session today, Christine.
Great. And just on a housekeeping note, I'm taking the liberty of muting most people's microphones just because we do tend to get a little bit of feedback on the webinar. But if you want to ask questions, and the other interesting thing about working virtually, we can't see if you're grasping what we're saying, if you're nodding your head or you're sitting there in puzzlement. So please feel free to unmute your mic and ask us a question, or shoot me a question privately in the participant chat, which is up top on your desktop or over to the side. We'd be happy to answer questions and take questions as we go along, because there's an awful lot of information that we're providing today. So. And it's a really good time to be looking at your data. We're starting off the year, and I know I always come back to my desk in January with a lot of to-dos or big projects that I know, I'm responsible for the year, the company is involved in for the year, new projects and priorities. And all of these will require confident decisions to be made so that we know we're moving in the right direction. We're taking concrete steps towards our goal. We can really mark the progress along the way so that when we hit December on the calendar, we know we've had a really productive and successful year. And all of those decisions and the results of those decisions will be based in evidence, based in high-quality, healthy data. So if you want to be thinking of some projects or goals that you've got in mind for this year, I'm sure there's something pressing, some reason that made you think, oh, gosh, this is the year I want to try to get some data, start turning my data into real knowledge and intelligence. That'd be interesting to kind of keep in mind as we go through today's seminar. So what we're going to do is take a top-down approach today. We're going to go from the comprehensive, big picture of data governance to more discrete look at what constitutes individual, good, healthy records or healthy record sets, and then down into a single kind of data element that we find at Ringgold as, evangelists for good data and healthy data, that we find particularly effective, and that's standard identifiers and how they can be used as a base to support any other kind of data governance or record cleansing that you hope to do. Okay? And then what we'll do to wrap up is we'll take a look at Ringgold's data services and how we typically support our clients, how they're used Some of the services we offer are a little bit like a Swiss Army knife. You can use that data in a multitude of different ways to answer a lot of different questions about your own clients and the wider market. So we'll go into that as well. And we're all sitting on a potential gold mine. We've got many different data silos. In my past, I've worked with any combination of the following: a fulfillment system, CNF system, an association management system, a membership system, online hosting, usage stats tracking service, all of those. And there's lots of records sitting in all of those different silos about really valuable clients and valuable members and other people who are important to us as part of our constituencies. And sometimes those silos are talking to each other, and sometimes they're not. When they are, when data can be easily transferred between those silos and you feel really confident making decisions based on the data you're getting, you can leverage that healthy data to gain really solid insight into your business. It supports your strategic planning, so you can decide, well, gosh, identify problems. Gosh, where are we seeing things that we don't expect to see in our membership silos or in our records or anything like that. Supporting your ongoing business operations. Jay, did you want to jump in at all?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, we have the same problems as any other business, and the recent experience of Ringgold acquiring Book News Incorporated was a great example where we had overlapping systems, duplicate systems, and a real need to consolidate our business operations. And so, just from practical experience standpoint, when I first came on board, I came on the Book News side of things, and then it was sort of an added benefit to be working with Ringgold to make Book News part of the family. Because they had unique identifiers that we could use to attach to records across our different data silos and bring that all together. So we've sort of lived this this message of having healthy data ourselves by having to merge multiple systems with disparate data, all kind of trying to say the same thing but in a different way. I think we not only advocate for healthy data, but we benefit. We benefit from drinking our own Kool-Aid, so to speak.
That's a good way to put it. I think we can all think of some instances where, poor data has had real life consequences for us. You can kind of read through these, but I'll tell you a story. Years ago when I was working on some consortia and multi-site licensing projects, I needed to design a statewide consortia license for a U.S. statewide university system. And again, I say that it's U.S. because that's an important point. These were all records in English, so that was one hurdle I didn't have to clear. But I was trying to gather all the institutional subscriptions, personal subscriptions, open access fees, authors, members, into some kind of a dashboard that would give me a real sense of all the touch points my company had across the single statewide system. And it was incredibly time-consuming to retrieve the data, to normalize the data, to massage it into something so that I could even start to understand how much of an impact this statewide system was having on my company's business, so I could even begin to formulate an offer for them that would make sense for both sides. And this was a consequence of not having quality data governance practices in place across silos, across the organization. Okay. I don't know what's on your to-do list for the year, but our clients often come to us with some of these kind of challenges. They're looking at, say, tracking. A lot of clients now want to track open access much more robustly. Where are those folks coming from? Where are the authors coming from? Which institution are they from? And what country are they from? That's going to dictate, what APCs they pay. We want to track the funders, which maybe aren't entered in a standard way in those records. The age-old problem of journal mergers and launches. Your company has acquired a journal from another publisher, and now you need to sync up those subscriber records with your own internal systems and make some sense out of them so you can truly see, where do you have business for this journal and where are the opportunities remaining. Another thing that we see an awful lot with our clients and across the industry, everyone kind of thinks about, you know, should we be moving towards the direction of tiered or differential pricing, or somehow a custom price is needed for a particular subscription product or database. You know, we need a lot of information. We need to understand total holdings. We need to understand what kind of institution we're looking at. And good data can support those decisions. Okay. Jay, did you want to talk a little bit about the book side?
Sure, yeah, I can talk a little bit about the acronyms that we have up there. PDA, DDA, refer to the same thing, patron-driven acquisitions and demand-driven acquisitions. And it's really linked with ebooks being on the rise, you know, constituting almost a quarter of the market share in terms of monographs sold into the institutions that we've dealt with on the library side. What we're seeing is a real growth in the type of descriptions for content that are out there and the way that patrons and traditional acquisitions librarians are interacting with that content. And this ties together a lot of different concepts that Christine's already touched on, but boils down to being able to go down to the content level and properly identify contributors, the research funders to those, to that content, and be able to create views of the data that would include, you know, who's funding this research, what research is really selling, and where is the funding coming from. Being able to associate the authors and contributors in hot research areas with their particular institutions is something that's a goal for us personally. And then I'll talk a little bit more about how we're taking our philosophy of data governance down to the content level to properly describe, especially monographs, for sales and discovery. So that's a bit of a segue into the overarching concept here that we want to start off with to sort of set the stage, being data governance. What the total wellness program for your data, if you will. We're really talking about a 30,000-foot view of an organization and what is being done with data in the organization. So this is really at more of the strategic and the planning level. So we can move on to the next slide, and I'll just keep going here. So in this case, I should really start off by saying data governance is a term that can almost be daunting at some point, because I think there's sometimes a misconception that if you're going to take a shot at cleaning up data within your organization, it has to be truly holistic and systemic and touch absolutely every system you have. And we've seen really almost every iteration of a data governance plans within within our customers that we've worked with. We've seen single systems cleaned up, small groups of systems in the sales department linked up, and all the way up to full-on ERM type integration of financial systems and sales systems and fulfillment systems. But really, the concept of, no matter how it manifests or what size of the project you take on, it really it shares a single definition, which is essentially what are the processes and policies, organization and technologies that you're going to use and manage and make the data available, accessible, ensure that you have good quality, consistent data, that it is something that can be audited internally, which then speaks to what you can export to customers who may be interested in your data, and ultimately the security of your data by keeping your systems free of stray elements and making everything just more visible and accessible. And what we're really talking about, regardless of whether it's a big project or a small project, data governance is really getting your daily exercise and eating your vegetables, which I like this slide. Partially, Christine put it together because I was confused at first. I didn't get that eating my vegetables was good for me, like data governance. I thought it was, that's really a very well-organized produce bin. It's a little bit of both, I guess. But having these things well-organized and having a disciplined approach to creating well-structured data is what we're really talking about here. And on the next slide, we talked about how good habits pay off. And that's what we're really trying to message. And we are advocates of good data, and good data is achieved the same way a good physique is achieved, and that is good habits. Maybe not a big push, but maybe a big push at first, rather, but an ongoing, disciplined, consistent approach to making sure that your data is consistent. And what we're really trying to do here, we bulleted it out, but is to increase the consistency and confidence. That contributes directly to making good decisions and getting a good strategic view of your business. As I mentioned earlier, we've experienced this ourselves. Before we had our systems integrated, there was a huge amount of doubt about whether or not our sales systems were delivering actual prospects, or if we were missing people, simply because we had too many puddles of data that we wanted to bring together in a single pond. Once everything is together, much easier to know that what you're looking at is real and complete, which increases the value of the data. We all run our businesses on information, and the clearer you can make the picture for yourself and your internal staff, the more value your own data is going to hold. Translates directly into what kind of level of customer service you can provide to people. Getting a clear 360-degree view of accounts becomes possible. There's a huge amount of benefit to build in some accountability for the information quality. That's something we probably want to talk about with everyone individually at a later time and go into too much detail here. But we also see huge benefits from efficiency. Just as I said, we were, in our own personal example, we spent a lot of time looking at multiple systems, checking whether or not we were reaching out to the same contact more than once through different communications channels. There's a lot of waste in the system that's eliminated by having all data tied together and interoperable with one another, which speaks directly to how effective is the staff in using their time, and then, as I mentioned earlier, improve data security by having a good handle on what you really have without sprays in remote data silos. So,
and to throw in a little bit of a story, one of our clients has been having an awful lot of trouble reconciling where their print to online subscriptions. How was that migration going? They couldn't figure out on a trend level. They had a difficult time ascertaining, well, how quickly was this migration happening? If people moved from print to online, what was the revenue impact for individual accounts? And really, how quickly was this trend taking place? So they, supported by some Ringgold services, they implemented on their own side an awful lot of the infrastructure and the policies and processes that would allow these different data silos, because they happen to hold their print and their online customer records in completely different systems. So they weren't talking to each other. So they made investments on their own side to make sure that those silos could start to talk to each other. They also used some of our services inserted in the data governance process. We'll talk about this more a little bit later, to help them reconcile who those customers actually were that were sitting in each of these two disparate silos. So by implementing a really wide-scale data governance program over this very large customer, institutional subscriber set, they've been able to arm their sales staff with better information before they go out and start migrating customers from one format to another, to, bunches and bunches of print journals to, let's say, an online alt package or something like that. And then to also see the trends on a larger scale, to see how quickly is this migration progressing, and where are the wins and losses coming along the way. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll throw it back to Jay.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to at least break down what a standard data governance plan looks like. And as I said, these can be large scope plans. They can be, smaller projects. But the details of the standard plan can be look a little big or a little overwhelming. But the truth is, which I'll get into a little more detail on the next few slides, we have that broken down a little bit more. But what we really want to leave you with is that it's really not that different than any other project that you might take on. It has many of the same elements to plan, and then the bit in the middle about executing and then ongoing monitoring. Well, Ringgold comes into play in boxes 3 and 4 here, where we clean and improve data capture, and then provide ongoing auditing services to make sure that your data, new records being added to the database are clean. But as I mentioned, that we're really for maintaining an overarching data governance plan whenever possible, just as a matter of best practices, and ultimately this will contribute to the health of the business. So what we can do is take a look at these sections of a data governance plan in a little more detail in the next slide. So planning and prioritizing, very similar to maybe any IT project you might take on, but it's really scoping how big you want project to be in terms of what are you trying to achieve, what problems are you trying to solve, what goal do you want to meet. As Christine said, it's a good time of year to be thinking about these things for the coming year. And who are the results really going to matter to you? Who are your stakeholders, and what do you have to work with, and what might be the kind of things that would get in your way. It's just a good idea to have a good roadmap ahead of you before you get started. In step 2, that's where we start really working with data. You want to take a look at what you've already got. How good or bad is it? Where are the gaps between linking different silos together? Which involves taking a look at the current systems, taking an inventory of what data you have, what silos, what databases you actually have, and how is it located? Where is it housed, and how accessible is it to whom? And then we move into the next slide with 3 and 4, where we start really working with the data. And as Christine has talked about, we at Ringgold clean and normalize the existing data, bring it all together so that the records are complete and consistent, add useful data elements as necessary. My personal experience is the example that I mentioned earlier, where we had different systems at Booknews and at Ringgold and really needed to bring them together. I had the benefit of being able to use Ringgold IDs and our internal auditing service to audit our CRM at Booknews Incorporated, which made it much easier to bring our data together. Once you've got the data playing nice with each other, essentially, that's the time to move into how you capture data, be it user inputted or staff member. There's lots of tips and tricks in terms of limiting what a user can actually input into the system so that you're sure that when a new record is created, it is either validated in real time, we offer a service that can help with that, or that options at input are limited so that when someone is presented a request to input the state that they're from, they don't put in, well, I think, actually, Christine, you have a good example about this stuff. How often can do?
I would say, we actually had to, it was funny, in the registration process for this particular webinar, it just had state and it didn't have a drop down. So I have people registering from the state of, fully spelled out California, and then we have some CAs and we have some CALIFs. So frankly, I'm going to have to normalize this little small data set of just a handful of folks who've signed up for these webinars. But, had we had kind of a more robust system through our, web provider, we might have been able to standardize that and say, all right, you're only allowed to pick from this drop-down list of countries and this standardized drop-down list of states, things like that. Makes it much easier than people putting free text in any fields is kind of the death of clean data because it will never be put in consistently across the board. So any field, when you're, we'll actually talk about this particular step 3 in the last webinar in the series, in webinar 4. But free text is really one of the, as much as you can minimize free text in any data capture, you'll be much better off. You'll be much happier in the end.
Christine, you're clearly scarred by prior experience.
Oh, I'm telling you, I'm up nights. No.
Yeah. And then once we get the data inventory cleaned and we know how to handle new records once they're getting into the data set, I always like to say that data governance is really a journey, not a destination, because once you've got your house in order, there's the issue of maintaining it. And it really does require an ongoing commitment to making sure that Staff is aware and well-educated that you get reports of any errors that may occur where data appears to be inconsistent, and then tracking it as we move forward, which is much, much less painful than it might seem, especially with the right data governance program in place. So with that, that's the idea of having a healthy data program, and we call that data governance. But I think we want to drill down now into some more practical examples and real-world descriptions of what constitutes healthy records. And
yes, that's exactly. Thanks, Jay. So yes, we're going kind of down the funnel. So data governance, it encompasses the infrastructure, the technologies, the processes and policies, all of those things. Now we're going to look at the data themselves, the records themselves. Where our data lives in all of those different systems. They're like little houses, and when you move from one house to another, we have an awful lot of clients. We all do this. We move to, we're onboarding a new association management system. We're onboarding a new CNF system, or we're migrating our online content from one host to another, so the authentication system may change. That's a really good time to look at the health of the records that you're going to be migrating. So just like when you move house for real, you don't want to move the junk along with it. You just want to take what's valuable and relevant and needed for your new business going forward. Okay, so let's take a look at what constitutes specifically healthy records and data. So back to our New Year's resolution idea. You might have kind of a vague sense that your data is just not working for you. I'll tell you, in a previous life, my company, and as many companies do, produced monthly CNF circulation statistics. How were our institutional subscriptions faring this month compared to this month last year, and this year end compared to last year, that kind of stuff. So sometimes those statistics would come out, days, even weeks after the close of the month, because there was a lot of data massaging that had to take place. We had to remove comp subscriptions. We had to account for really complicated consortia accounts where some of them weren't actually paying, but they were getting access through other channels and things like that. And comparing our subscriber records, you had to do a lot of tweaking and take out all the records that had little asterisks on them before you could really do that end of month tally and see where were we at, okay? But if you want to get really specific about what constitutes a healthy record or a healthy record set, this is the punch list, okay? So just to take it from the top, think of a record, think of a subscriber record or a publication record or something like that. Are all of the fields that need to be filled in, are they filled in? What we see very frequently are address fields. The state is in the city area, the, address 1 and address 2 were merged together somehow. In the name fields for an author or a contributor or something like that. Maybe you don't have a field for middle initial, and the middle initial is getting tacked on to part of the last name or something like that. So should you have more fields to fill in, or are there a lot of empties where values should be filled in to give you an accurate picture of that record or that institution, whatever it might be? Is the data accurate? Is it correct, or is it misleading in any way? Are there a lot of duplicates in your record sets? And I'll tell you, this is something that we see time and time again. We have a lot of we very often work with our clients to help them clean their institutional subscriber records. Let's take good old Harvard. They've got a lot of libraries. They really don't consolidate them, so lots of people have many, many records for Harvard out there in their paid subscriber files. So do you have a lot of duplicates, or are there duplicate attributes within a record? Okay. Let's see. Are they current and up to date? Have new records been imported regularly, or have they been reviewed regularly? Are they consistent? Are you using standardized formats for data elements, like that California example I spoke of before? If you've got only one way to put that in, it'll always be correct. Okay. Or does your data give kind of conflicting information within a record? And does it conform to standards? Okay, we happen to use in Ringgold, we use the ISO, oh gosh, there's another number behind this. I don't forget what the number is, but we use the ISO standards for country two-letter designators instead of the full name of the country. But that's a standard list that we pull from and populate our records using that, okay? So if your data is not healthy, if you're not checking a lot of these boxes, you're going to want to see what you can do about cleaning up priority record sets and priority records, okay? And, you know, no matter how good or poor your data is, one of the things, we come back to this again at Ringgold, this is, again, the foundation of what we do, but we really believe in the value of unique identifiers and the introduction of as many standard and industry-wide unique identifiers into your records as possible. So even if your records and data, they're pretty healthy, they can still benefit from identifiers. And what they do is really ensure that data silos and records can be linked together really effectively, and it makes your data interoperable, okay? And we'll dig into unique identifiers in much greater detail in the webinar that we're going to give in 2 weeks. But we do want to give you an overview at this point. Going to our health analogy, I will call them the superfood. They're a really powerful single ingredient. So what are they? It's like a social security number. Okay? It's a numeric or an alpha-numeric designation that associates that number with a single entity. In the Ringgold database, Harvard is number 1812, and that's it. There will never be a change. Okay? The entities that we talk about here in scholarly publishing are institutions, people, pieces of content, and a single data element. These single institutional identifiers or any kind of identifier can disambiguate one, let's say, person from another person, you know, this J. Henry from that J. Henry at a different institution down the street, or another institution with a similar or shared name. For example, there are 2 Northeastern universities in the world. One of them is in Boston and one of them is in China. So unless you have a single institutional identifier that uniquely identifies Northeastern University in China versus the one in Boston, you'll always have to look at at least two different pieces of data in a record to see if you're talking about the same institution, or to determine which institution you're referring to. By having a single data element, it's a single hook into that record, okay? And if your data is questionable, you know, you've got 5 different spellings for Harvard and, you know, 3 different records and things like that, then a unique ID can sometimes be a shortcut to cleaning up your records. There's no need to normalize the names because you're not relying on the organization name field to be the identifier for that record, okay? And again, there's a lot of identifiers out there, but they're all created for different purposes, and they have different scopes, okay? You know, we've seen the emergence of identifiers in our realm in scholarly information to address like kind of the natural areas of differentiation that we need to cover in scholarly publishing. The people, and by that I mean the authors, the contributors, the researchers, the members, any individual like that. The content that they create, be it a book, an article, and the institutions that are purchasing and licensing, distributing, publishing the content. So those are the kind of 3 big, you know, sectors of identifiers that we have available to us to refer to the people who are the people and content and institutions that are relevant to us. Okay? And again, we'll go into much greater detail about many of these identifiers in our next session.
And Christine, I might just jump in here quickly.
Yeah.
On that last slide, you know, something that occurs to me is kind of interesting in terms of what we've seen is this explosion in requirements for rights management, right? And a good deal of the standard identifiers help solve a lot of those problems. And I'm struck by people because one of the things that I found very interesting is the fact that not only people don't have to be real to be identified anymore. So, you know, imaginary people have characters in books have standard identifiers to identify them as well. So, I mean, I think the good idea that I don't think publishing can take credit for coming up with a, you know, ISBN as the original sort of unique identifier, but it was a good idea. And so it's now really going through almost any kind of discrete describable piece of data, including characters of fiction. So.
Yes, I'm sure Harry Potter has an ISNI, so.
Certainly.
And the more of these identifiers that you can use and embed in the records that you use, the more easily this kind of big plate of spaghetti will start to get sorted out. And these are all the players in the scholarly information chain, okay? So we'll see author records, and within an author record, you'll see a lot of different data elements. There'll be the name of that author, there'll be, let's say, where are they doing their research, what manuscripts are they submitting to your submission peer review system, and, this author and this end user, they might be the same person. But when data is getting transferred in all these multi-directional ways around the supply chain, it's like that game of telephone we played when we were kids. Without identifiers that are universally understood, we're really not sure if the same entity is being referred to once that data has been passed around, or when that entity appears in different data silos, okay? But should you choose to use identifiers internally, of course, your internal systems, again, your CNF system will start to talk to your membership system, will start to talk to your financial system. But if you choose to use identifiers that are universally understood, that are accepted industry-wide, your whole supply chain can start to come together. And records and data silos are really just become a very short hop from each other instead of the game of telephone that we saw on the last slide. Okay. So the little things mean a lot. By little things, I'm talking about these identifiers. They seem like a really small ingredient, and they're a single small discrete data element. But I hope we've been able to show you how powerful they can be in joining up the records that we all are generating and that are proliferating every day in our industry. And again, using these identifiers as the basis or one key element in your healthy records can start to influence your data governance program, make it even more effective, and of course, support your business. That's the real goal here, supporting your business, allowing you to interact with your clients more effectively and allow greater efficiencies and real knowledge and insight to come from that great mountain of data that we're all sitting on, okay? And with that, I just want to before we go into talking specifically about where we can fit into some of the data governance efforts that we spoke of. Let's say, are there any questions? Would anyone like to raise a question or send one in via chat? Okay, someone did write in and ask about how Ringgold and ORCID are working together. So I'll address that very, very quickly, and we'll dig in a little bit further, and we can also talk about this offline. But ORCID is the, oh gosh, I'm going to forget what the full acronym is for, but it uniquely identifies researchers and contributors to scholarly information. If any of you have an ORCID record, you'll see now there is an element in there when you create your ORCID record that you can say where your institutional affiliations are. Where did you get your PhD? Where are you working now? That kind of thing. And the Identify database that I'll describe in a moment is the backbone for that institutional affiliation module. So basically, people who are creating ORCID records can select from a controlled list of institutions rather than, that free text that I said that is always so fabulous. So, okay, so I hope that answers that question. And we'll dig into Identify a bit first, but we were founded with the birth of Identify, our Identify database, which classifies, let me advance a bit here, which classifies and catalogs the institutions that matter to folks in scholarly publishing. Okay, so you can see a record here, an Identify record here, kind of looks like a little catalog record. And what we're doing is just we're uniquely identifying and describing that institution. Okay. A lot of our, I'll just walk you very quickly through an identifier so you can see the scope of information that we use and that we gather in every record. Here's that number 1812, that single unique identifier for Harvard University. Here are some common alternate names for the institution. We provide location information. We provide the URL or domain name. Domain names are really handy field to have. consortium membership. So we link to other institutions within the database. I'll talk more about that in the next slide. And then you'll also see here on the right-hand side of your slide the details. This is the classification information. What kind of institution is this? Is this an academic institution? Is it a university? Is it an academic system? Is it a hospital in Hong Kong, or is it a pharmaceutical company in China? Okay. What's the size? FTE counts is something we commonly will include in our records. And I'm sure you're thinking of different ways you could possibly use these different data elements to inform, what you know about the institutions that matter to you. We include tier information. That's key to a lot of our clients. RGT here, this is a Ringgold tier. We apply a tier, and here you see it's just an alpha-numeric, two-digit designator that tells you that this is A, academic, and level 4, which according to our editorial rules, is a research-heavy institution that grants PhDs in something, okay? So it just gives you a basic size and scope, a real shorthand to what kind of institution is this, okay? And once we've cataloged and classified the institution, we map them into hierarchies, or what I sometimes call family trees. And you can see here we're going from the state of California down through the UC system to the UCLA main campus, down through schools, divisions, and more discrete entities. So you can see this whole family tree and how this whole ecosystem goes together. And you can imagine if you're a publisher publishing in lots of different areas, you may have subscriptions all up and down this kind of a family tree, okay? And the Identify database at the moment has about 370,000 institutions. It grows all the time. It is updated and changes all the time. We span all industries and market segments and regions. Again, anywhere where we find there are institutions that matter to scholarly publishers, we want to provide authoritative information about those institutions. The vast majority of institutions in Identify are those that license or purchase scholarly content, but we also classify and include publishers, funding bodies, intermediaries like sales and subscription agents and hosting companies, all the institutions that matter to us. On the side of the licensees, again, you'll see things like, corporate medical hospitals. We are not meant to be a directory of every, let's say, hospital in the world, but what we will cover are all the hospitals where we know they are acquiring scholarly information, okay? So our scope is different than the scope of other directories or databases that you might have access to, okay? Our auditing service is where, so Identify gives you kind of the whole world according to a publisher's point of view. The audit service provides a publisher with just the Identify records for their institutions, for their institutional subscribers, okay? And we do this. This is a premier service. We have about 40 researchers worldwide. A lot of them are former librarians, folks that love to research, that kind of thing, who speak about 30 different languages. And so they are able to decipher the records that we're provided, map them into the organizations that are in Identify, and then what we do is return to you your, really one of the more valuable sets of customer data we all have, our institutional subscribers, in files that are designed to be uploaded to an array of systems. Whatever your own systems are, we tend to work in data formats that are universally ingestible. Or you can also use the data and files for immediate analysis. Essentially, we're providing you the Identify records and hierarchies for your subscribers, okay? So it helps folks to kind of organize and really get a handle on who do we really have, who are we really working with, okay? So these are some common use cases, common things that people do by utilizing the Identify records that they get either via, a full-on Identify subscription or via auditing and getting the Identify records just for their own clients. And, we see our clients realizing benefits at every kind of point along the spectrum. We have a lot of clients who may need to audit a very small data set. We're just trying to get a handle on, our company has a strategic need to understand all of our subscriptions in China this year. So we'll handle just those records for that region and give them a better picture of what's happening in their subscribers just in a particular strategic region. Or we have very large organizations who've restructured, they've merged, they've acquired additional journals, or two companies have merged together. And like Jay was saying, we're doing on a kind of a modest scale at Ringgold and Book News. They may be acquiring, an array of journal titles or an entire other company, and they've got to integrate those records on a large scale. Businesses with dissimilar data. So they're using data policies akin to what's described here to kind of normalize all of their data into a single system, or keep two systems with an enhanced ability to work together. A lot of publishers that we work with will use those Ringgold identifiers as part of a centralized order fulfillment and control system. They won't allow, say, a new account to be created without a Ringgold ID. A Ringgold ID will become a required field in a customer record, okay? And therefore, they will use the identified database and some of our other kind of bolt-on services to ensure that every new account is just that. It's truly new, and it's not just a different name for another organization they've already got. We all get subscriber records in year on year from subscription agents that, let's say last year it was in French, this year it's in English, next year it looks a little bit different. Or, I used to work for a company, we had a lot of military orders. And you can imagine all those kind of military acronyms for different, I don't know, Naval Surface Warfare Center kind of thing, or, or these military, and government mail stops. You couldn't really tell which government entity did I just sell that to? Which sub-department of, the National Science Foundation did I actually sell that subscription to? So helping you to disambiguate those institutions, find duplicate accounts or related accounts that you might have, okay? And again, we're doing this internally. By using Identify in combination as kind of a tentpole authority file, to match authors to their correct institutions, you can embed those IDs into research workflows and then further through the supply chain. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways it can be used. Very quickly, our consortia directory, as you saw on that slide on Harvard, we do hold some consortia information, consortia membership linkages in Identify, but a lot of our clients really need to dig deeper into the consortia landscape. They really need to understand that global consortia market, and they need authoritative information to inform their consortia strategies or how they might approach a specific consortia. So that is the need that the consortia directory online is really meant to answer. Okay? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay, who's going to talk a bit about ProtoView.
Yeah, well, ProtoView is a good time for me to have a different voice on the line here, I suppose, because ProtoView is different, however, closely related to the other products and services that Ringgold offers. It was a natural fit, really, to purchase Book News. So at the bottom of the slide here, you see Book News had been in business for 35 years and essentially took monographs from scholarly publishers and created uniform metadata, descriptive data, title data, very basic information about the titles, and then employed professional writers to create an abstract. And Book News is, for many years, referred to those as reviews, but really they're descriptive data. And we tightened up the editorial policy of the Book News production system to reflect descriptive data that was human readable, yet the right size to be displayed on a screen, give good quality information, and be indexed by search engines. What ProtoView really is the answer to a changing market, really. Publishers for years had relied on Book News to create objective summaries of their titles and feed those into the Discovery Network, which at the time really consisted of providing title records along with the abstract to services like Baker and Taylor's Title Source 3 and YBP's Gobi acquisition system, so that those folks out there buying books had some sense of what they were looking at from the description, not just the title level metadata. And we saw a need coming from our publishers saying more and more of the market is shifting to a just-in-time model, and rather than a just-in-case, meaning with the rise of demand-driven acquisitions and so-called web-scale discovery services such as Libris Primo, metadata is more important than ever at the title level. When we started looking at it, we thought, okay, this is a system that not only tracks information about the title, but also about the authors. That provides us with an ability to link into the institutions that they may be affiliated with. Due to our relationship with ISNI and ORCID, it also allows us to tie into other publications that author may be responsible for or contributed to. And it helps us create a more complete sphere of data about the publishing supply chain that goes right down to the content level. And we saw a great foundation in the book news business and thought really because they've worked with print and fine-tuned the system to help publishers promote print titles, it's time to start looking at electronic content since more acquisition dollars are going in that direction. And so ProtoView is really the next step, the next generation, if you will, to meet the needs of publishers to promote, advertise, if you will, in a very targeted, very data-driven way, titles that exist in a multitude of formats. And so when we looked at the foundation and started building onto it, of course, we were guided by industry best practices and employee standards wherever possible to create a nice snapshot of data at a title level, and then use the other resources that we have at Ringgold to tie that data into the other sources to determine, what other publications have been produced, what other institutions have contributed to this research, that kind of thing. And we've just launched ProtoView. We'll have a separate webinar, the third session, I believe, all about the importance of metadata at the content level, at the book or ebook level, in order to meet the changing needs for promotional and advertising services for publishers that we provide. So, and that's it. The next slide, I think, is just a very simple description of what ProtoView does. I hope I've explained the mission, the problem that we're trying to solve, that is really promoting titles in new places where dollars are being spent. But essentially, we take in data from publishers and other metadata sources, and we clean it up, we normalize it, we make everything consistent, we add content summaries, which are professionally written by real human beings, and then we deliver that data not only for our own website, ProtoView.com, to any subscribers, but we also resell that data through ProQuest and other aggregators to populate library online cataloging systems, the discovery services. As I said, we already feed a YBP and similar academic acquisition systems. And we know from our experience and our relationship with those folks that titles carrying complete metadata, especially the abstracts that we create for the titles, sell at a higher rate. Which in the webinar that we'll put on in February about this, I think it's extremely important to note that use, driving actual use of a title once purchased, is becoming just as important metric within libraries as the initial discovery for purchase. And ProtoView is really designed to help not only drive that initial discovery for purchase, but also drive ongoing use for any number of reasons you can think of. With that, I think that's enough on ProtoView right now. Without me going into a full-blown presentation.
Well, basically what we're trying to do is help your data kind of play well with others on the ProtoView side is really what it's all about. With that, I'm going to open the floor to questions. We have a few more moments, and I did have one question come in, and someone asked about data that is held or submitted to publishers by subscription agents. And I'm assuming the most common thing that we all get are our annual subscription orders that come in for our journals, books, databases, and things like that. We do very commonly see those, obviously, in great numbers in client data sets that we audit And wherever there are enough, let's call them breadcrumbs, in a record that we can discern that it is, yes, that's definitely an order from Harvard, or no, it's definitely an order from Oxford University, we will audit and map your records to the proper one in the database. So even if sometimes the post office box might be something in Birmingham, Alabama, if there are enough other clues in the record that we get from you, the publisher, we can be able to map it definitively to identify and understand who that end user is. So I hope that is helpful. And let me see, anything else? Someone else has asked about the mapping of Ringgold IDs to ISNI. And some of you may have seen we are an ISNI registration agency. ISNI is one of the other identifiers that we've spoken of. It's an identifier that uniquely identifies contributors or creators of content, and a lot of times those creators may be an institution, like say a publisher or other institution. And so ideally, over time, we would like to map Ringgold, directly to the ISNI database. We are collaborating with the folks at ISNI, and we are sharing data, and that matching matching process is being undertaken right now. So we will hopefully have more news and more press releases to share on that as the process goes forward.
Right, and that's really an industry collaborative initiative with ISNI because the other organization that does deserve some mention here is we're both Ringgold and ISNI are both working with OCLC. They're providing some of the computer engineering expertise and hardware to help manage these very large data sets. And ultimately, I guess, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here, Christine, but I mean, I guess one of the things that I think people get confused about between ORCID and ISNI quite a bit is that ISNI is really like that Social Security or ISBN number for an individual, right, or a single entity, where the ORCID database holds a good deal of information about works that have been published by a specific author or institutions that they have been affiliated with, and it's more of a profiling system for an individual contributor.
Yeah, there's a lot more robust information in an ORCID record than there is in an ISNI. And ISNI is really meant to be a bridge identifier between systems, and we'll really dig into the details of that in our next webinar. Someone has also, I've got two more quick questions. One person has asked, how can we build a link from our local system to automatically query the identified database? We actually do have, there are a number of ways to acquire and access the identified database. A lot of folks, we have a basic interface that can be utilized. We have some clients that take the full database in-house. Then we're talking a little bit more on the robust data governance front, folks who have data warehouses and can kind of consume and ingest the entire identified database and build links in their internal systems. Or kind of the middle way, the Buddha's way, if you will, is using our API. And we have a basic API that our clients can use to call from their systems directly to identify and retrieve information. So there's a lot of ways to kind of plug into the database and get the data out. I hope, was that helpful? Did that make sense? Okay, so hearing nothing, I'll move on. And the final question from someone was, would the ID for a publisher and a library overlap if the library publishes? Well, the information, an institution can play lots of different roles. And so it could be a, let's look at Oxford University as an example. Oxford University, they've got libraries. They're an institution of higher learning. They're consuming a great deal of scholarly information. But one of their standing divisions is Oxford University Press. So, of course, they will have an ID as well. But the press is a subsidiary. It is a division of, if you remember that family tree that we displayed, Oxford University, the main overarching entity, would be kind of at the top of that family tree. And one of the divisions would be Oxford University Press with its own Ringgold ID. However, it will be definitively linked to the main overarching institution. So I hope that answers that question. Okay. And let me see, we're just at about 3 o'clock now. We had, oh gosh, yes, here are our other webinars are upcoming the next couple of weeks. So if you wanted to register for any of those additional sessions, more than happy to have you join us. And I'll be very happy to speak with any folks offline or separately if you wanted to delve into additional pieces of information. So Jay, did you have anything to wrap up with, or?
No, I really didn't. In fact, the only thing I was going to wrap up on earlier was the unique identifiers to give you a chance to have a drink of water more than anything else. So you covered it. So I think that's it, and we're ending exactly on time here if there aren't any other questions. But thank you, everyone, for your attention and time today.
Right. Thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you spending time with us this afternoon, and we will circle back with all of our direct contact information, and we will also give you a link to the complete slide deck as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.